quick turnaround this time for this week's Hot Takes episode. Here we go. First one is Hot Take. I know Venture just came out for trial, but I feel this was the most healthy hero launch we've had in a long time. Yes, Venture is new and feels a little hard to deal with, but there have already been meaningful counterplays like Ram Vortex, Brig, etc. I agree. I don't actually think this is a hot take at all. This is pretty good out of the box in terms of balance. The numbers, the combos, everything feels pretty good right off the rip. I'm sure there still needs to be a little bit of fine-tuning, but overall, Venture is strong when up close, but has very distinct weaknesses, the ones you've mentioned, and probably flyers, Echo, Farah. Venture is limited by range. I think the weapon is limited by 15 meters, so it's not really great in long-range poke. You have to get up close, and if you're up close, you have to have probably one sort of escape button, so similar to Mei and Reaper, they have Wraith Form, they have Ice Block. Venture can burrow and disengage, but also has a bit of disruption, can combo, feels great, a good weave and skill expression with the abilities. I like Venture a lot. Great teaser trial weekend, and I'm excited for season 10. Next hot take, Overwatch devs, this is a wall text, devs pandering to the competitive players has stripped many of the characters' identities from them for the sake of competitive viability or feeling more fun to play against. I personally know casual players who were pushed away from their game because their favorite heroes in the DPS roster started to feel like their whole playstyle was just shoot the gun. Torb, Reaper, Symmetra, and Mei are examples that come to mind. Torb and Mei more than the others. Torbjorn throwing out armor packs, building up his turret, and ulting for a level 3 turret gave him a sense of identity that made him fun to play. Now he has a turret that builds itself and a button that makes him shoot faster. Mei's ability to freeze people along with the rest of her kit made frustrating to play against, but it also gave her an identity that made Mei players buy into the character more. Now she is just a right-click spamming bot with a wall made out of paper. I disagree. I think this is a pretty hot take because I think the character identity or the fantasy is still intact, right? Mei is a disruptor with like the walls and like the slows. You still can feel like Mei. Torb still feels like Torb. Yes, he's more reliant on the gun, but I still feel like the identity is there. And for all the players that stopped playing who mained those heroes, it relieved the other 35 heroes that had to deal with that hero. So yes, maybe Torb, Reaper, Sim, and Mei, maybe some players like the original kits of the 4 heroes, but there's 40 heroes in the game, right? Including Venture, so 36 other heroes don't have to deal with frustrating mechanics, like a turret that you had to build up a level 3 turret when Torb ulted was super annoying back in Overwatch 1. Symmetra with the whole like latching beam style. Torb's turret did too much by itself for no work, so they had to tune it down and give more power to the gun. I think it's totally fine to give more expression to the gun. It doesn't mean all the expression is in the gun for Torb. You still have to weave around your turret and make use of your ultimate in some capacity, but I think this is a bit of a stretch if I do say so myself. You said the point where yes, Mei's ability to freeze people the rest of the kit was frustrating to play against. That's the thing. More people were way more frustrated to get frozen by Mei by default than the 20 Mei players that probably enjoyed freezing people, because of course you're so powerful, right? You're freezing somebody and stunning them for free every time. Of course the Mei player misses that and wants that back, but I think for the sake of the game, a lot of the changes they made were healthier, so yeah. Hot take, I believe that the problem with supports that everyone has is the reactiveness of their abilities rather than how they previously were proactive. Anti-nade, discord, speed boost, damage boost, boop, sleep are all buffing or CC abilities that don't find value unless you utilize or land them. However, things like Lamp, Suzu, Grip, Res are considered worse to play against because you inherently can't force out or gain an advantage on them without having to use your own team's utility first. The playstyle is very one-dimensional and doesn't give players an opportunity to show off their skill without the enemy team being proactive. It leads to a very slow state of game and can be a very tedious loop. Okay, this is a wall of text. You kind of went in a few different directions, so I had to reread this slowly to understand what you're trying to go at. You're saying that problems with support is the reactiveness of their abilities rather than how they're being rather than previously were proactive. But you listed a bunch that are proactive by nature. Throwing an anti-nade is a proactive play, but throwing a defensive nade is probably reactive to the damage that the enemy team is putting onto you. So I'm not sure where you're trying to get at. They don't find value unless you utilize or land them. Well, I mean, same with Lamp. You can get some bad value on it if you use it too early. And you say you can't force them out or gain advantage without using your team's utility. You can force it out without utility by just poking and pressuring enemies with just your gun. You don't have to use an ability to counter with an ability. In some cases, some ultimates can force those abilities out a lot easier, but sometimes if I'm KarQ, I'll have to Suzu if someone just gets low by getting shot randomly. And that's part of Overwatch as well. playstyle. I wouldn't say this playstyle is very one-dimensional. I think there's a lot more to it to force abilities out. And I think the hot take from last week saying support abilities are inherently supposed to be annoying is actually a good take. I agree. Like all the things you listed, like a support hero, their identity isn't supposed to be to replace a tank or replace a damage hero. Although some were a bit closer than others, like Alari could arguably replace a DPS hero because it's high DPS, and Old Brig could replace the tank because of how tanky they were. So you want the support identity to be just a healer and utility, and that's what the support encapsulates. So they're gonna have annoying abilities by nature, like damage boosts, buffs, debuffs, CC abilities, and vulnerabilities. I think that's part of being support. Maybe my bias is showing, but I don't think it's very one-dimensional in that sense because you do have to use them correctly. Arguably, they're a bit easier to use in some sense because you just throw them on the ground. Maybe there's a world where some could have a bit more like aim, so that's why I feel like people aren't too annoyed with Sleep Dart because it's hard to land, but things like Suzu and Lamp are very, very easy to just put down. But I'm not sure how you would change that to have more skill expression in that capacity. That means the hero has to be weaker in other aspects to make up for how strong those abilities are to land, I suppose, right? But no, I don't agree with that. You can't force or get an advantage without having to use your team's utility. Poke them out, and you can force them in many, many other ways besides using your own abilities in some cases. And sometimes trades are okay. You have to trade abilities for abilities. Take punch for punch, right? Or else everyone just holds on to the abilities and just all-ins every time. You have to have a push and pull in this game. Ultimate layering is what Spilo calls it, which is a term I've now adopted ever since I've been scrimming and learning from him as well for our team. Hot take, queue times with 6v6 were actually faster before the game was dead in like 2020 than now because tank feels even worse to play now. It just feels shorter because towards the end of the content drought is fresher in our minds than just a few months before that when we had a month-long good patch, like when Seagull returned to Overwatch and gave it praise for a whole video. Well, I don't really think it's a hot take that 6v6 queue times are faster before the game was dead. Higher player population equals more people queuing, more tanks by volume. Just the sheer amount of players would capture some tank players that are just queuing, and of course the queue times would be faster. So that's not a hot take. But then the second part where you're saying tank feels even worse to play now, most tank players have agreed with this, at least most main tank players. I think off tank players can still have a pretty decent time. Sigma, Zarya players can still pop off and feel like they're contributing in a lot of cases. Queen players. But yeah, sometimes playing Reinhardt, not so fun. Winston, depends on your team. But yeah, the off-tank players are still doing all right, but main tank suffering a little. But you said it just feels shorter because towards the end of the content drought is fresher in our minds than just a few months. Well, this is kind of attacking. You're just justifying the faster queue times before the game was dead. But I agree with that part, so let's move on. Before that, we had a month-long good. Oh, that's basically your whole take. Queue times were faster before the game was dead. Okay, there's nothing to it. Of course it was. The game was, when there's more players playing, pre-2020, before they stopped doing content drought, then of course the queue times were faster. Next hot take. 3 tanks and 2 healers is the most fun mirror. You don't feel the solo tank pressure and the counter swaps are less impactful. As a healer, you have a way more chilled game without the low HP DPS, which can stress you way harder. I mean, that's subjective, having a fun mirror, 3 tanks, 2 healers. I don't play open queue, so I have not really experienced this in Overwatch 2, so I have no say in it, but that's close enough to GOATs, 3 tanks, 3 supports, and if you never experienced that, I thought GOATs was fun in small doses, but when the meta lasts for more than a year and a half or year, and then of course things can get a little boring. I think metas should be changing every season with new hero releases, new buffs, new nerfs, kind of change the dynamic of what's strong on certain maps. But 3 tanks, 2 healers, I mean, certainly could be fun if you enjoy it. I mean, I don't doubt your fun level, so I don't really think it's a hot take. Next, supports are, oh, this is when I mentioned the supports annoying thing. Okay, let's read this. Supports are supposed to be annoying? Not really. The real issue with support currently isn't anything to do with support itself. It's the fact that several DLC heroes have abilities that cannot be countered in any way, shape, or form. Suzu cannot be blocked. It cannot be stopped. Death cannot be caused to anyone applied with it. Abilities cannot interact. Lifeweaver pull cannot be stopped, cannot be damaged, cannot be CC'd. Bap lamp, you cannot be killed while within it. And high elo cannot be broken with like proper corner usage of the lamp. Other issues like overtuned heroes or abilities like KarQ being able to teleport through walls should require LOS, and Suzu should not be able to be self-applied for healing. The overall hero playstyle is fine for supports, but certain abilities are really what ruin it for everyone else, and why stop playing to begin with. And again, I am a tank player. I feel like you're kind of onto something. Now that I think about it, most of the newer releases do have abilities that are, you know, made for the newer generation of Overwatch with things that can't be stopped, which is true in a lot of cases. I actually sort of agree. I can understand your frustration playing against abilities like that. Compared to old Overwatch 1 non-DLC heroes like Ana, Sleep Dart, and Nade can be countered quite a bit with like a good shield or like a good defense matrix. One argument or one way that I could see to make those abilities less annoying with BAP Lamp, for example, maybe it doesn't go through shields. That could be something. I always thought it should have I remember when he got released 5 years ago. If you lamp in like a Winston, if you lamp outside of like a Winston bubble, anybody playing in the Winston bubble does get protected. So maybe that could require LOS to make it a bit more counterable. But then of course BAP would need maybe a bit of compensatory buffs in other areas, but that can be something to consider. Swift Step. I've always said Swift Step should not be able to be used out of spawn for like 5 to 10 seconds. For example, if we're playing Watchpoint Gibraltar on attack and like, you know, you die, but you're almost capping the first point. If I die as KarQ, I can tell a teammate to play in the server room and I can literally respawn and teleport straight back into that fight near the end of the checkpoint. Like that feels a little cheap. So Wrecking Ball in Overwatch 1 had a nerf where he was unable to grapple for like the first 5 seconds out of spawn to get rid of some of the stalling tactics. But I think we're at the point in the game where if Doomfist is able to punch and slam out like that, then maybe Ball doesn't need it. But then in that sense, maybe KarQ does need it because KarQ can skip a gazillion walls, or maybe it's like a certain number of walls you can't pass through. With Suzu, the invulnerability is annoying, but I think that's rewarded with good timing. Sometimes it's a fluke where you like perfectly Suzu and the Doom punches right past you, but a lot of times the invulnerability is such a brief moment. It's usually good for big burst damages, which is true, but that's why like it should be on a long cooldown, and it can be forced by just pressuring the KarQ quite a bit. But yeah, KarQ has a lot of escapes. You know, like I said, I kind of see where you're cooking with this with the new DLC heroes. Comparatively speaking, it's true. And if you don't want power creep, you don't want to buff like Sleep Dart or all the other old non-DLC hero abilities, but maybe tune the current ones down a bit more if they're still really frustrating to play against, and give supports other things. I can work with that as a support player. You're a tank player, I'm a support player. If BAP Lamp doesn't go through Winston bubbles or Rhine shields, that's fine. Maybe I get a little bit more juice in other capacities. I can work around that. Hot take, Lucio has to be meta or you know the game is cooked and has strayed too far from what makes Overwatch great. Anytime Lucio isn't meta, it is solely because the balance of the game is skewed too far into just having big numbers and not rewarding playing fundamental Overwatch. While I think you're a Lucio main, but while I agree, speed boost and Lucio is fun. It's never great where Lucio has to be a must pick in every single composition. What is fundamental Overwatch? To you, it might be a Lucio brawl comp, but there's so many different archetypes and variables you can swap in. You can go more slower poke style. You can go dive without Lucio, right? You go Ana Brig with Winston or something. You don't necessarily need Lucio to just like press W and speed into the enemy team. That's just like one of the many ways to play it. And fundamental Overwatch is less about Lucio and more about a nice interplay and synergy between your team, and that's the most rewarding for Overwatch in my opinion. A good weave of abilities, a good weave of ultimate synergies, that feels the best. You just sound like a very biased Lucio main. Hot take, the tank role passive is outdated and needs an update to keep up with the tank's current issues. Maybe like an increased resistance to debuffs, so the best playstyle isn't to mindlessly chuck your cooldowns at the tank. I actually agree with this. I wouldn't say it's super outdated. I think it's still very important that they have the knockback resistance and less all charge generation. But in addition, you might as well just do it all wrapping 30% reduction in all forms of CC, soft and hard, and debuffs. So 30% less knockback, 30% less time for debuffs. I mean, they already made specifically the Sleep Dart last a little less on tank specifically, but you could have just put that multiplier of 30% less or whatever, and it could help with like the nade not lasting as long, the sleeps. What else is debuff? The Discord, the DPS passive, 30% of like what is it, 2 seconds right now? It's still a nice reduction to like 1.4 seconds before it goes away if you decide to break out of LOS. It's incremental, but like 30% is 30%. So I actually agree with this. Wait, this is kind of going back to the supports are designed to be annoying. Hot take, supports are designed to be annoying. They are here to make your game less easy. The more support heroes that the teams design, the more annoying they will make support heroes because they need to keep player attention and innovate the design of abilities. So it's either support will deal more damage or have some big utility spell to annoy you. Kind of true in some sense, where the longer a live service game lasts with additional heroes and heroes like League, Dota, Overwatch, the more the design team has to like come up with things so that the heroes don't feel too homogenous. Let me just do a very basic example of DPS hero. Like Soldier 76 is a very bare bones point and click. You can't have too many of heroes, another DPS hero that does similar things, like just point and click and does the same job too closely to another, or else it's homogenous. So you got to really push the design a little bit. I'm sure if anybody plays like maybe League or Dota, can probably think of like one of the heroes and probably think of another hero that does very similar things. So maybe the design is like a different color or element or something, like ice versus fire, but like they have like a skill shot stun and an AoE magic blast of their element. So what's another factor to make things in the support sense a bit more dynamic? And one thing I've been thinking for Overwatch is it time to add elements to the game? They've already added fire and burning for Ashe. If Ashe dynamites somebody, Mauga will crit them, even if it's not the burn from his thing. So maybe we can start having support heroes with water or some cooling elements, or maybe like a Mei, if you have an ice wall, for example, and Mauga or Ashe specifically shoot the ice wall, it melts a little bit quicker. Maybe it would complicate the game a little too much, but if we want to stay innovative without too many frustrations, that could be something to go to, but then that would also annoy people who hate counter swapping, apparently, people who don't like switching. I don't know, I've always felt like counter switching, hero switching is fine in a game like Overwatch. It's what makes Overwatch Overwatch. I've never really bought into the counter swapping thing. It's mostly a tank issue. But like, I mean, if I'm like a friggin' Pikachu, like not switching into an Onyx, like that's kind of on me, you know? So if we introduce elements, it could be a very minor thing, like a minor boost, but it could make supports more fun. Maybe it's because I'm like all Overwatched out after 8 years and I need something fresh and more exciting like that to consider as a new variable. But yeah, so I guess the takeaway point here is your hot take about the design, hero design, will continue to be more complicated is not wrong. Maybe one, like, have you seen Lifeweaver's kit on release? It was overloaded. Although we can argue Alari's kit was quite simple, but like an interplay between abilities like Venture and I guess Mauga, although his playstyle was pretty simple, like weaving between the two guns was supposed to make him a bit more dynamic. But yeah, you can see how the new releases are never going to be as simple as Soldier 76 ever again. Hot take, balance doesn't need to be the goal when buffing or nerfing heroes. Part of what makes the game dynamic and interesting to play year after year is the shifts in the meta. So buffing characters who are featured in a season or event can make that character more fun and boost their popularity. Yeah, but then you run into, it could be fun for a casual player, but then if you are not balancing with the idea of buffing or nerfing to tune them into like hopefully an equilibrium for a well-roundedness, then you will get stagnant metas. The shifts in the meta happen because of certain changes, and if you don't tweak with that in mind, you can run into more problems. So that's very hot take. Blizzard should focus more on gun skins because it's an FPS and you can't see your character skin very much. True, I agree. I mean, I'm not a big cosmetics guy, but like, you know, Valorant has weapon skins, CSGO has weapon skins, and more recently they started to do it with like the hard light weapons and the Los Muertos weapons. So I think and the Jade weapons, the golden weapons, I think they're picking up on this. Then yes, you can't see your own character unless you emote or until the end of the game. So understandably, the enemies can, but you can't. So I see where you're coming from with that. And I think they probably are focusing on it more now than I've ever seen before. So there you go. All right, that's it for this week's hot takes. Leave yours in the comments. Don't leave an essay, and maybe we'll talk about it next week.